Hey Oliver, man. So like, okay, getting started on sweep picking. Now, I'm not the best sweep picker in the world, but I'm making a lot of progress in the last few months because I've kind of started looking at it again since December. And like, my journey started, with sweep picking started, I don't know, about a decade ago, where I learned a trick. And like that trick stayed in my tool bag for ages and would be trotted out like a party trick, but it wasn't really part of my playing. Not something that I would just slip into naturally. It would be the kind of thing I'd have to set up for. And look, it's not a bad way of starting. Like I think everyone should start that way. Okay, before we get too far, definition of terms. A rest stroke is a stroke that cuts through a string, so starts above a string, cuts through a string, and hits the next string and rests on it. Right, that works in either direction. Right, so we do upstrokes at rest, or we can do downstrokes at rest. Additionally, there are free strokes. So free strokes are where we start above a string and we pick through a string and we miss the next strings. That's called a free stroke. It works in either direction. Another thing we need to be aware of is the slant of our hand, right? Whether or not we are positioned this way in order to slant downwards, or if we're positioned this way to slant upwards. The other thing that we need to be aware of is called a tracking motion. And tracking motion is either pivot tracking, like this, like a record arm, or saw tracking, where we move our arm backwards and forwards. So, with those concepts in mind, let's start with talking about how do we do a trick. So I think really important with the trick is that we use as minimal amounts of complicated techniques as possible. And we try to do something that is short on the guitar. So the one that I first learned was this A minor shape, right? The nice thing about that is it's triplets. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? Because we've got 3 on the way up, 3 on the way down, right? Now I first learned that as a down, 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 up, pull, up, free. So that way we're ready to start again. Right? Now, what's good about that is that it's not too complicated. There's not a long set of up sweeping, so you're probably more comfortable down sweeping at the moment than you are up sweeping. And there's no tracking motion involved because we're only doing this on 3 strings, so we don't have to worry about like how we transfer between strings, as well as how do we continue the sweeping motion. So start with a lick like that. Focus on rhythm. Rhythm is crucial for trying to make your sweeping mean anything. You'd be much better focusing on how you articulate a line and what rhythm you're playing in than worrying about speed, because speed will just come as you practice more and more, and you worry about the articulations and you worry about the rhythm that you're playing with. So 3s. Right? Now we can also do that with like this shape. After you get that, you might want to start moving that top note down chromatically. A little messy. I don't really practice these tricks anymore. Same up here. That was terrible, but you get the idea, right? Moving the top line. Now, those tricks are pretty good. The problem with learning a trick like this is that it's much like a party trick. You can only do it when you set yourself up in a very particular way. You can only do it if someone gives you a count in, right? It's the kind of thing that only works in specific circumstances. Now, you will find those circumstances, and you should immediately, as soon as you can learn the trick and play it halfway decent, you should try to put that into a backing track, like try to find a way of making a solo connect with it. What I found was it was ridiculously hard to connect an idea to that. It was so far away from my playing at that time, 10 years ago, that it was just something that was off by itself. I'd think, oh, time for the sweeping trick, and I could do the trick, but it always had that feeling of like slotting in a prefab vocabulary in the middle of your story, where it's just like, it's someone else's words I'm speaking. It doesn't feel like it fit with the flow of these sentences. That doesn't mean it's still not cool, and it doesn't mean the audiences won't like it, so like definitely give it a go. Moving past that point, I think these days, once we have any kind of system and tools, we need to know the shapes. And then after we know the shapes, we need to start practicing with rhythm, and then we need to start practicing with patterns. So once you get a little bit of experience with that, we might take a much larger pattern, right? Now, how large, that's up to you. I'm a big fan of this one in particular, right? I'm picking all those notes, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, at the end, right? And the first protocol would be a pattern of 1s, right? So can we just do that with an accent of 2s and an accent of 3s? That's what I'm calling a pattern of 1s, is we're only going to play each note once, we're not going to double back. And if we work with accent groupings of 2, that could be 8th notes or it could be 16th notes. Or if we work with accent groupings of 3, that could be triplets, sextuplets, nontuplets, and anything like that. So thinking in 8th notes, right? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 right? Really trying to feel out those rhythms, making sure that we're spelling the thing articulately. Right? We don't want to really staccato or anything. We want to be focusing on the sound. In 3s, 3, 4. Right? Yakata, 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 ya. How long can you keep that going? Can you keep that on a loop? Even at a moderate tempo like that, focus more on the articulations than you're focusing on the speed. If you need to, slow down, but focus on those articulations. No matter how slow you go, you want that to still sound pretty good. Then you start working on patterns. So like, we do patterns of 2s. I think the most interesting pattern of 2 is like descendant notes. So you might go, right? We might do patterns of 3, 4, all of these different things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I almost never really do that much work on 5s, and I really should. But it's focusing on making sure that you get clean rhythm out of it. You know, yukada, 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 yukada. You're always repronouncing the same figure as you go through that. And focusing on just being able to move, right? So get some shapes down. I use 3 or 4 different shapes. 3 of them are outlined in that document I gave you, that big guitar toolkit document. So like when you're ready to do some bigger dives that isn't just learning your trick, do learn the trick first, then you get into that. So one of the problems with these larger shapes and why it's kind of hard to start with, you'll notice that because I have to translate all 6 strings, a tracking motion has to be involved. And with sweeping, tracking motion kind of also blurs into picking motion, which is quite frustrating as someone who has really worked on their picking quite a lot, because we don't want those things to blur together on the whole most of the time. We want them to be independently controllable. So sweeping is kind of its own little feel and vibe. You definitely should work on your alternate picking too, because they both solve kind of different solutions for us. Now, as soon as possible, you also want to try to start turning it into shapes and lines. Things like little things that sound a little musical, little ways of coming backwards and forwards. Once you've learned a bunch of shapes, your job then is to try to string the shapes together. So we've got this shape, and I might slide up to this shape. Switch into doing a new shape in those step-second inversions. That kind of thing. Cycle through shapes, try to connect them. It's essentially all the same work you might do with a scale. Run rhythm until we get some dexterity, run patterns to build our dexterity. Once we have rhythm and once we have patterns, now we have a certain sense of physical freedom, then we worry about how we make lines out of it. Now, a quick note on the right hand, right? Down slanting, this posture where we lean our hand over the center of gravity string. Here's the string, right? If we're like this, our hand is kind of all on top of the tip of the pick. So when we hit the string, it feels like a brick wall. So we want to make sure we slant our hand in the direction we're going in, by and large. Doing that is kind of like dragging something over something rather than pushing it through it. So generally speaking, we're leaning in the direction we're going. But initially, you're going to probably feel like really big extreme positions really help you do this. And on the trick, that won't be a problem. Right? This is one of the traps that we walk into when we do these very small figures and try to break them out to larger figures, is they're not physically the same. And you can get away with a lot of weird stuff on small figures that you can't get away on longer or more flowing lines. So I think ultimately, what you want to do is make sure that you aren't just training a straight up and down arpeggio all the time. That's only one particular problem, and it's not the hardest problem to solve. You want to make sure that you're mixing in with trying to skip back in the arpeggio, trying to double back in the arpeggio, trying to move a bit more freely. Right, getting around kind of combining more normal picking with the stuff you're doing, right? So altogether, that will start giving you the physical side of what you need. Then you need to start worrying about how do I use this stuff musically, right? And genuinely, the best place to start is take this to a chord progression. Maybe we do like an A minor, and then we do an E7. A minor, E7. Right? And you might give yourself a time limit: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Right, over and over and over again. Like that becomes just a game to play. How far can I go around the neck? How much can I evolve? How can I keep going? When do the wheels fall off? Keeping it at a nice, relentless pattern where we're still worrying about the sound of the tuplets. Right, that kind of thing. So do that chunk of work, that first chunk of work on like the physical side of things. Think about tracking, right? As we get outside of 3 strings, we have to then move our tracking motion, and that's going to cause some instability. It's likely that that's going to be a thing that's going to mess you up. So if you find you're okay on 3 strings, but not on 5 or 4, it's the tracking motion that's messing you up. You want to make sure you isolate for a while the idea of doing your down sweep and your up sweep, so that way you can check in and be like, which one of these causes me more problems? And it's probably going to be the up sweep, because from memory, I think you're a natural down slanter in the lessons. So you kind of set up this way naturally. So often it's hard for us to feel what it's supposed to feel like falling upwards to rest that in a reversed pick stroke, in a reversed pick angle. So you might actually do some practice where you go, okay, well, if I'm in this pick angle, I'm supposed to be resting my upstrokes. I can do my pentatonic scale in this position, up rested, down free, up rested, down free, up rested, down free, up rested, down free. Right? Just getting used to picking in this strange position, which will help you with the comfort of, pulling it all together. Initially, you're going to like probably far more extreme positions, and eventually what you want to do, go with the extreme positions to start with, but eventually even them out. So we end up with something that's the changes between the down and the up aren't too big, so that way we can do them quickly and accurately. If you need to go from like this kind of angle to like this kind of angle, it's just never going to work at speed. So in order to get lines that like change direction quickly, that kind of thing, right? We need to be able to have something that's fairly close to one another. So like I said, I learned a trick. I learned in a very extreme, at the time I was a rotational downstroking player. So I learned downsweeping in a really extreme position. And could set myself up to do this downstroke and then this big upstroke. But one of the things I had a hard time combining with my normal playing in was the fact that the positions were just too extreme. And it wasn't quite, when I was playing most of my other lines, they just were not as extreme as that. Okay, man, hope some of that helps. Let me know how it goes. Catch you in the next lesson.